Erica and Sharon are sisters who began their grief journey in 2006 when Erica's 10-year-old son Austin drowned. Together, they participated in a grief education program, were so moved by this experience, they studied and became specialists so they could help the brokenhearted find recovery. In 2015, tragedy struck their family once again when Erica's oldest son Donovan was killed in a motorcycle accident. Erica and Sharon are committed to sharing their experiences of love, loss, and healing through this podcast. Now your grief specialists, Sharon and Erica.
If you think about it, animals grieve. When I learned that, that's the one thing I thought about was all the little Facebook videos and things you see of animals actually grieving when their owner dies, like when you have a pet, or, you know, the ones out in the wild, especially whales. Whales always get me when I see those videos because they're like natural moms. But we as humans are wired for grief. We're just not taught that. We're never taught how to talk about grief. Grief is the most taboo subject, if you think about it. This happens to me all the time. I have that kind of face. I think that people just start telling me their life story. So if you get in the line at the grocery store, this happens to me all the time, and someone will be in front of me, and they, you know, the longer the line, the more conversation you have. And when it gets to the point where I share, because they'll ask the natural question, you know, how many kids do you have? And initially, that used to put me like deer in the headlights because I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to dishonor, at the time, just Austin. And then now that I've lost the two boys, I don't want to debilitate someone in the grocery store line. So sometimes I share, depending on the conversation, but sometimes I don't because I'm like, I don't want to get into this, it's too heavy. But the moment I do share, you see this panic look then come over their face, and they're like, okay, I got to go. That's my thing. I got to check out. They don't want to talk about grief. It makes people uncomfortable. It makes them feel either an experience that they've had, that they remember how sad they felt, or they never learned how their situations were grief. So it's like the most taboo subject. Grief is not a mental illness, a pathological condition. Grief is not linear. Grief is not 5 stages. Grief is not a sign of weakness or a problem to be solved, a task to be finished, or a disease. We have a sister, Yolanda, who's just become a nurse practitioner. In January, she graduated. In her program, they are teaching medical professionals that any grief lasting longer than 6 months needs to be diagnosed as complicated grief. 6 months. Do you think you'll be over your situation in 6 months? So if you go to a doctor, let's say after that 6-month mark, and they ask you questions, and I'm sure I would be emotional. It happened to me. I'm emotional and I'm crying. Then they want to fix you with medication. You know, here, take this. Thankfully, I know enough to say no, because that's not the route I want to go. I know that I need to process. I know I need to keep working. But for those that don't know, take the medication. They start taking these pills. And then they never get to connect with the emotions. 6 months. How can you get over something that broke your heart in 6 months? I have an amazing doctor, and after a year, I had to get on blood pressure medication. That was something it was creeping up on me, and I was trying to outrun it. But when Donovan died, my pressure just went through the roof. So he did give me medication. So I went back a year later just for a checkup, and he just blurted out, "So how's your grief?" And I laughed. He's an amazing doctor, but clearly not taught how to talk about grief. And I kind of educated him a little bit. I said, I understand that, you have concerns, but I wouldn't just approach it like that with any other person. So I did explain it to him. He's like, oh, wow, okay. But it was so funny because he just said, how's your grief? Like, how's your head feeling? How's your arm? Well, let's see here. I keep going the wrong direction. Okay, signs of grief. Here we go. Lack of focus. A zombie-like state. That whole first year after Austin and after Donovan passed, you're like in a fog. It's literally like you need a designated person to be like, stand here, eat this, sit down, now you have to sleep. because you don't know what to do. You're just so sad all the time. You don't know how to get back and try to function as a person. Sometimes you overeat, sometimes you have no appetite at all. With both times for me, I couldn't eat. I felt like the food was going to get stuck in my throat. When Austin passed away, my mother-in-law was there, and so many people were bringing food. It was so sweet. So she didn't want it to go to waste, so she was making all the chicken into chicken salad. That was the only thing I could eat after Austin passed away. The only thing that I felt like I could get down. So I think I had one chicken salad sandwich every day for like 2 weeks straight because I couldn't eat anything else. Then when Donovan passed away, I couldn't get any food down. I was actually just living on protein shakes because I just felt like the food was going to get stuck. You're so sad. It's like your body starts fighting against everything that's going on. Lack of sleep. Sleep, you pray, is that much needed respite to get away from the pain, but I couldn't sleep. I'd go to bed. Lewis would do the same. We'd get in bed, go to bed, and I could get up around 3 in the morning, and I'd just be laying there, and we're both snorers. So I knew he was up because he wasn't snoring, and I would just say, "Are you up?" And he'd go, "Yep." And we just lay there in the dark, just staring at each other, not talking, just laying there. Sometimes you're sleeping too much, which is what came later on when I did start functioning a little bit better. Then I was sleeping all those days when Jordan would go to school. Isolation, definitely. I stay in the house. We're very social. We're very active in our community, and Lewis was always wanting to go out and do things. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to stay here, come up with an excuse. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to be around people. I tried it a couple times, and I remember sitting at a table. It was my girlfriend's birthday dinner, and they were all sharing. We all have kids around the same age, stories about their sons, and I just thought, I'm dying inside. I had a smile on my face, and I'm nodding, but inside I just felt like I was dying. So isolation was much better because I got to be sad by myself. Sometimes your emotions go up and down. On any given day, you can be on a roller coaster. There would be days I would start out and I'm like, okay, I feel all right. I could do this. And then you go on social media or I would get, condolence card or something, and then I'm right back in bed. I'm like, I can't do this. By minute, you could change. And that's okay. It's normal. It is so normal. Intense anxiety. So I was sharing with Shelly earlier. I have two completely different grieving experiences. After Austin, I didn't have the anger or the resistance. We didn't have the direction. Yeah. After Donovan, I was so resistant. I was pissed off. I was mad at him. I was mad at everyone. I was mad at how bad I felt. And because I was refusing to do the work, I then had this lovely gift called anxiety, which I'd never had before. And how it presented for me was, I guess because I'm so vain, this is why it happened to me. On any given day, parts of my face would swell up, like I'd been stung by bees, just out of the blue. Without me eating, some days it would be like you're trying to figure out, okay, what am I allergic to? So you pay attention to what you have in your coffee. I had the same stuff in my coffee forever. Then it's like, okay, what did I eat for breakfast? And it would be different times, different events, definitely around Christmas. We were driving to Louisiana. We wanted a change of scenery. That's where our family is. And in the car on the way, and I would feel a tingling first. And I would go, is something happening? And whoever I was with would be like, oh my God, what happened to you? I mean, huge, swollen face, like Hitch, if you can imagine. That in my face. I'm not even joking. And I had to start carrying Benadryl with me, liquid Benadryl, because I was so scared it was going to happen in my throat. I didn't know if I was going to, choke one day. When we got together and did the work, never had another incident after that. Not one incident. So I tell my clients, because I've experienced firsthand, grief will find a way. It will find a way. Whether or not you're willing to do some work and to express it, to talk about it, your body will begin reacting. Migraines, stomach problems, weird swelling. Grief finds a way because it has to get out.
Before you go there, let me talk about closure,
Okay.
and then we can talk about the myths.
Okay.
One of the things that we teach in grief recovery is we do not teach closure. How many of you guys have heard that? Well, when you get closure. I really felt like if the next person that said to me, when I get closure, I was going to give them closure. The thought of closing the door on Austin, closing the door on my relationship with him, like it almost felt like I was going to have to forget about him, like I couldn't think about him anymore. We do not teach that in grief recovery. In grief recovery, we teach completion. You complete your relationship with your loved one. And I'm pretty sure my assistants left my towel in the car, so I'm just going to use this tissue here. That would be that one.
I knew it. I was looking at Matt like it was you.
On March 2nd, 1996, Austin came into this world. And I was there moments after he was born. Erica and I are 10 years apart. And even though we're sisters, we very much have a mother-daughter relationship where she leans on me for a lot of things, and it is amazing. And so Austin was just born, and she needed help with breastfeeding, and I went over to the hospital, and it was a joy. It was absolutely a joy. Austin and I walked a journey together for 10 years. He was 10 years old when he passed away. And that relationship between him and I was just amazing. We had all of these great experiences and some crazy. When Austin was about 18 months old, she has a different version of the story, but I'm going to tell you mine. She went to Las Vegas, and she said, "Hey, can you watch the boys?" I said, "Yes." So she brings them to the house. This is my version. I open the door, and she's holding Austin, but he's facing me, and he has a pacifier in his mouth, and she's sort of holding him out like this. And she chucks him to me. I catch him, and she's like, "Hey, can you get him off the pacifier while I'm gone?" And her husband go for a great weekend in Vegas.
That is not what happened.
Austin and I fought the entire weekend. He was adamant he was going to have that pacifier. One of my most favorite pictures of him are from that weekend where he's standing on the kitchen counter, and I gave him a sucker, and he has sucker all over his face, and my head is just tilted to the side. My daughter has taken that picture from me and won't give it back, but it's this amazing picture that I have. But he and I fought that whole weekend. When he was around 7 years old, I had Austin for the weekend. I quite often had him if he ever saw my husband around. He would go around and tell everyone that my husband was the richest man in the world and that he was the most famous person in the world, and he loved my husband. And the minute he saw him, he wanted to be near him because my husband owned everything that Austin was about. My husband owned horses, he has a tractor, he had a dually, and Austin was all about all of that stuff. So this one weekend I had him, and we were going to the bank, and he would not get out of the car, and it was summertime, and I was like, he's 7 years old. It's like, okay, I'm just going to run into the bank. So I cracked both of the windows in the back of my car, and he called me Parrain, which is Godfather in Creole. And he was like, "No, Parrain, I can't get out." So I just left him in the car, and I went in the bank. Of course, the teller starts talking, and I start talking. Some guy walks in the bank, and he goes, "Someone left their baby in the car." He screamed it into the whole bank. I went running out, called her on the phone. I'm like, "Your kid almost just got me arrested." On that very same weekend, we were driving down the street, and he was sleeping in the back. Tony and I were in the car, and Tony goes, "Wow." There was an old-fashioned car that drove by. Tony goes, "Wow, look at that car." And Austin was sleeping, and he sat up, and he looked at it, and he goes, "1956 Chevy Bel Air." And Tony and I both looked in the back, and it was just so cool. And he laid back down, and he went back to sleep. And it's whenever we see a Chevy Bel Air, we are reminded of that moment. There was this one moment where Austin, crazy kid as he was, decided that he wanted to pee in the sink at the little boy's bathroom. And Erica and I are convinced that the principal of the school hated her. And so she would do all this stuff to Austin, but this day he decided he wanted to see if he could pee in the sink. He couldn't reach said sink, so he peed all over the floor. And when the recess bell rang, all the little boys came running into the bathroom, and they fell in said pee, and they were all covered in said pee. The principal was going to kill him. Erica was at work. She called me and she's like, you need to go save his life. And so I had to go to school and get him. And just before he passed away, Austin took a little pocket knife out of my dad's jewelry box and took it to school. Well, of course, Columbine had happened. The pocket knife was about this big, and he got suspended for bringing a weapon to school. I had to go get him that time, too. And, buddy, what did you bring this for? Well, I wanted to see if it could cut pizza. And so that was my experience with him. But on June 17th, 2006, Austin drowned at the lake, and my relationship with him was cut short, and it ended. And we literally didn't know how we were going to make it through. We didn't know how we were going to make it through. But one of the things that I learned in grief recovery was to complete my relationship with Austin. I learned by working with my grief recovery specialists that I was able to share all of these moments with him and all of the things that hadn't happened yet. All of my loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations. All of the things I wanted for Austin that hadn't happened. We literally walked this journey together. And here I want to show you what it looked like. I was able to complete my relationship with Austin, not close it. I completed it. And why this is curly and a little bit different is because Austin was not here. But I was able to look at every aspect of my relationship with him as his aunt and do a review in my heart and complete. It is when we are not complete that we can become so stuck. One of the things we teach about, and Eric's going to share, is the myths of grief and loss.
This is the thing that I think was also so striking to me when we first started was all the things you've grown up with, all the things you've learned to say when someone has a grieving experience. Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. Especially if to kids. That gets said a lot to kids. Don't feel bad. You'll make another friend. It's always something to pacify the moment instead of letting them really express, I feel sad today. Jenny wouldn't talk to me. She wouldn't eat lunch with me. Giving them the tools to communicate. We just want to move on. We want them to figure that out because sometimes it triggers stuff with us that we don't want to talk about. Replace the loss. This is another big message we give to kids. Don't feel bad. We'll buy you another puppy. Get you another goldfish, another kitten. But when it comes to human relationships, you can't say that. People do. Because after Austin passed away, I was early 30s, I think. Don't feel bad. You can have other children. People said that to me. And it's not out of a malicious place. It's out of ignorance because we don't know what to say. And we don't practice really talking to someone who's sad and broken. Grieve alone. You got to be strong. You got to grieve alone. They tell mothers this all the time. Well, you don't want the kids to see you cry. So it's giving the message, you need to go cry in your room. I've worked with so many clients, and it's very common. They say, I just cry in the shower. They get it up every day, and that's how they start their day. Crying in the shower because they don't want their kids or their husband to see them crying. Just give it time. Oh, I hate this one. Just give it time. As if one day I was going to magically wake up without doing any work and a wand would, go over me because enough time had passed and it'd be like, oh, okay, I'm healed. I gave it enough time. Now I can go enjoy the rest of my life. That's not true. It doesn't matter how much time you give a broken heart. All it does is collect more brokenness along the way. Be strong for others. This was Sharon's big message, which she learned from our parents, rightfully so, because that's what they did. They showed up as soon as, like I said, we've experienced a lot of grief in our life, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and they were the first on the scene with the casserole or whatever food dish. Here, let me feed you. I don't know what to say, but I'm here, and I brought something to make you feel better. They were giving the message they were going to be strong for people. They would help make arrangements. They would help figure things out. They would make phone calls, but they didn't ever really talk about the grieving experience or event. They never shared feelings. And even with either of us, they did not share feelings. Keep busy is another one. You just got to keep busy. Get back into your routine. The sooner the better. And when I was told that, all I thought was, I don't care how busy I am not doing all my laundry. I'm just going to be thinking about how bad I feel. You know, let's say I did really like to clean house. I would just be cleaning and being sad because it doesn't matter what meaningless task you're doing, it doesn't change that you're still so sad. And the pain is still so heavy.
I'm going to share real quick. Go back to that one. So being strong, definitely, that's who I am. Grieve alone, I did the grieve in the shower because I was trying to shield it from my children. And I would go in the shower and I would cry as much as I could. And I knew the moment I turned that faucet off that I had to be strong for them, 100%. I was trying to be strong for Erica and I was trying to be strong for them. Here's the other thing that happened, is that I forced my children to do the same thing. And that's why, Ro, I'm so happy with where she is and how she can articulate where she's at. I literally remember saying, you stop that crying. My sister has lost her child. Like, I didn't allow them to grieve because I didn't know any better. The thing about the myths that happens with the myths is we don't know any better. And so we say these things because we want to make people feel better. But now I want to open the floor up to anyone. Have you guys heard